This story happened to me a few years ago. I was excited to start a new chapter in my life by moving to a big city. I had just landed a job and was looking for an affordable place to live. That's when I found an ad for a room in a shared apartment. I had just graduated college and was used to sharing a living space with other people, so sharing didn't bother me at all. The city was also very expensive, and I needed to save as much money as I could, so I was happy to have someone to split the bills with. The rent was cheap, and the location was perfect, so I decided to move in. My roommate, who we will call Sarah, seemed friendly enough at first, and we really hit it off. We would chat and watch TV together, and I felt like I had made a new friend. But after a few weeks, I started to notice that Sarah was acting strange. She would come and go at odd hours, and sometimes she would stare at me for long periods of time without saying anything. I tried to ignore Sarah's odd behavior and hoped it would go away, but it only got worse. One night, I woke up to find Sarah standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me with a blank expression. I screamed, and Sarah quickly left the room, claiming that she was sleepwalking. I was so terrified and decided to confront Sarah the next morning. Sarah apologized and said that she had been under a lot of stress lately, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Things only got worse from there. I started to notice that my things were being moved around when I wasn't home, and sometimes I would find strange objects in my room that I had never seen before. I would also hear strange noises in the apartment at night, like someone was moving around or whispering. My anxiety reached an all-time high, and I started to feel like I was losing my mind. I confided in a friend who suggested that I install a hidden camera in my room to see what was going on when I wasn't home. What I saw on the camera was the stuff out of nightmares. Sarah had been sneaking into my room when I wasn't home, moving my things around, and even sleeping in my bed. I was horrified and felt violated. I moved out of the apartment and reported Sarah to the landlord, who evicted her. I never spoke to Sarah again and tried to forget about the experience, but the memory of my creepy roommate haunted me for a long time. I realized that sometimes, the scariest things are the ones that are right in front of you.
My coworker Mike and I moved in together about a year after working together. I never thought I would end up living with someone like him. He was loud, obnoxious, and always getting into arguments with people over the smallest things. But when I was struggling to pay rent, he offered to let me move in with him. At first, everything seemed fine. But then I started noticing how he would get angry over the smallest things. If I accidentally left a dish in the sink or didn't put something away properly, he would start yelling and cursing at me. One night, I came home from work late and found him in the kitchen, drunk and waving a knife around. He had gotten into an argument with some guys at the bar and was looking for a fight. I tried to reason with him, but he was in no mood to listen. That's when he lunged at me with the knife. I managed to dodge him, but not before he sliced my arm. I stumbled backward and tripped over a pile of clothes, falling to the ground with a thud. The pain from my head throbbing intensified as I lay on the floor, trying to catch my breath. I knew I had to act quickly before he could get to me again. I crawled over to the closet, my hands shaking as I fumbled for something, anything, that could help me defend myself. My fingers wrapped around a metal hanger, and I clutched it tightly, my heart racing. I heard his footsteps approaching, and I quickly got to my feet, turning to face him. He lunged at me again, but this time, I was ready. I swung the hanger with all my might, and it made contact with his face, causing him to stumble backward. I ran out of the apartment and called the police. They arrived quickly and took him into custody. I was rushed to the hospital and treated for my cut, but the experience left me traumatized. I couldn't believe that I had been living with someone who was capable of such violence. After that night, I couldn't stay in that apartment any longer. I moved out and found a new place to live, but I still have nightmares about what happened. I never want to be in a situation like that again, and I hope that no one else has to go through what I did.
I thought I had found the perfect roommate. She was friendly, outgoing, and seemed like a great fit for the apartment I had just moved into. But then, things started to take a turn for the worse. It started with little things, like her being late on rent and not cleaning up after herself. But then, she started getting aggressive. One night, she came home drunk and started banging on my door, demanding that I let her in. When I refused, she kicked the door in and stormed into my room. She was screaming at me, saying that I had stolen her phone, which I hadn't. I tried to calm her down, but she just got more and more aggressive. She started throwing things around the room, breaking anything she could get her hands on. I was scared for my life, and I didn't know what to do. Eventually, she calmed down and left the apartment. I called the landlord and told them what had happened, but they didn't seem to care. They said they couldn't do anything unless she actually hurt me. I tried to avoid her as much as possible after that, but it was hard when we were living in the same apartment. I was constantly on edge, never knowing when she was going to snap again. One day, I came home from work to find my door had been kicked in again. This time, she was waiting for me in my room. She had a knife in her hand, and I could see the rage in her eyes. I tried to back away, but she leaped towards with the knife. I managed to grab a lamp and hit her with it, and she stumbled back. I used that moment to run out of the apartment and call the police. When they arrived, they arrested her and took her away. I never saw her again, but the memory of her violent outbursts stayed with me for a long time. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there, waiting for her chance to get revenge. After that incident, I didn't feel safe in the apartment anymore. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow and double-checking that all the doors and windows were locked before going to bed. But even though she was gone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I kept having nightmares about her breaking into my room and attacking me, and I was constantly looking over my shoulder whenever I went out. I tried to talk to my friends and family about what had happened, but they didn't seem to understand. They told me that I was overreacting and that it was just a one-time thing. But I knew better. It wasn't until I moved out of that apartment and into a new one that I started to feel safe again. But even now, years later, I still get anxious when I think about that roommate and what she did to me. It's a reminder that sometimes the people we think we know can turn out to be our worst nightmares. And it's important to trust our instincts and take action when we feel unsafe, even if it means having to make some tough decisions.
I never would have thought that living with a roommate would be so terrifying. At first, everything seemed fine. My roommate, Emily, was friendly and seemed trustworthy. But as time went on, I started noticing things going missing. Little things at first: a tube of toothpaste, a couple of dollars from my wallet. I brushed it off, thinking that maybe I had just misplaced them. But then it started to get worse. My jewelry was disappearing, along with some of my clothes and electronics. I confronted Emily about it, but she just shrugged it off and said she hadn't seen anything. I tried to believe her, but it was hard to ignore the fact that things kept going missing. I started to feel like I couldn't trust her, and I didn't know what to do. One night, I came back from class to find Emily rummaging through my dresser. When she saw me, she froze and tried to play it off like she was just looking for something. But I knew better. I confronted her again, and this time she didn't even try to deny it. She admitted to stealing from me and said she was sorry. I didn't know what to do. I felt violated and scared. How could I live with someone who had no problem stealing from me? I tried to talk to her about it, but she just got defensive and refused to take responsibility for her actions. I started sleeping with my valuables under my pillow and avoided being alone with Emily as much as possible. But the tension between us continued to grow, and I knew that something had to give. It wasn't until I caught her stealing from one of our other roommates that I finally had enough. I reported her to our landlord, and she was evicted from the apartment. Even though she was gone, I still felt violated and unsafe. It was a reminder that even the people we think we know can turn out to be someone else entirely. After Emily was evicted, I thought that I could finally have some peace of mind. But the fear that had taken hold of me wouldn't let go so easily. I started locking my bedroom door at night, and I would jump at every little noise. One night, I woke up to the sound of someone trying to open my door. My heart was racing as I tried to figure out what to do. I didn't want to call out and alert whoever was on the other side of the door that I was awake. The doorknob started turning, and I held my breath. Suddenly, the door swung open and I saw Emily standing there with a crazed look in her eyes. She had somehow gotten her hands on a key to the apartment and let herself in. I scrambled out of bed and backed away from her, trying to figure out what to do. She looked like she was on something, and I didn't want to be in the same room with her. Emily lunged at me, and I stumbled back, hitting my head on the dresser. I could feel the blood trickling down my neck as she continued to attack me. I fought back as best I could, but she was stronger than I expected. Just when I thought it was all over, I heard a loud banging on the door. It was the police. Our other roommate had called them when she heard the commotion. Emily was arrested and charged with assault and breaking and entering. It turned out that she had been struggling with drug addiction, which had fueled her stealing and violent behavior. I moved out of that apartment as soon as I could. The experience had left me traumatized, and I didn't want to take any chances. I learned a valuable lesson about trusting the people I lived with, and I promised myself that I would never ignore the warning signs again.
Before I share my story, I should mention that at the time of this story, I was a 25-year-old female and my roommate was a 32-year-old male. He told me when I met him that he preferred to live with women because we were cleaner. I grew up with only brothers and didn't mind sharing an apartment with a guy. With that being said, I had always known that something was off about my roommate, who we will call David. He was polite and friendly, but there was always a certain air of mystery around him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He kept odd hours, always seemed to be coming and going at strange times, and rarely talked about his personal life. One night, I was up late working on a paper for school when I heard a strange noise coming from David's room. It was a low, rumbling sound, like the kind you might hear from a muffled television or radio. I thought nothing of it at first, but as the noise persisted, I began to feel uneasy. I decided to investigate and cautiously approached David's door. I knocked lightly, but there was no response. The noise continued, so I slowly turned the handle and pushed the door open. What I saw inside made my blood run cold. There was David, sitting on his bed in front of a laptop, surrounded by dozens of photos of women. Some were taken from afar, while others were close-ups of their faces or bodies. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like something out of a horror movie. David noticed me standing there and quickly slammed the laptop shut. He looked up at me with a look of fear and panic in his eyes. "I can explain," he said, but his voice trailed off. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified, but also curious to know more. David began to tell me that he had been leading a double life, that he had been secretly working as a private investigator, hired by women to investigate their cheating husbands and boyfriends. He showed me the photos and explained that they were all part of his investigations. But there was something in his eyes that told me he wasn't telling the whole truth. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something darker going on, that David was hiding something even more sinister. After that night, I couldn't bring myself to look at David the same way. I always wondered what other secrets he was keeping from me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger. I knew I had to get out of there before it was too late. Over the next few days, I kept a closer eye on David. I tried to talk to him and engage in casual conversation, but he seemed guarded and hesitant to share much about what he was up to. One night, I was up late studying when I heard David come home. I heard him fumbling around in his room for a few minutes before I heard him leave again. I thought it was strange, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. The next day, I decided to do some digging. I did a quick online search of David's name and found nothing out of the ordinary. But then I remembered that he had left his laptop open on the kitchen table a few days prior. I knew it was an invasion of his privacy, but my curiosity got the best of me. I found some disturbing things on his computer. He had a folder hidden away on his desktop labeled private that contained photos and videos of women in compromising positions. It wasn't just porn, it was like he had been secretly filming women without their consent. I felt sick to my stomach. That's when I realized that the nights he had been leaving the apartment were probably spent stalking and filming women. I couldn't live with him anymore. I packed my bags and left the apartment without saying a word to David. I reported what I found to the police, but unfortunately, there wasn't much they could do without any concrete evidence. It was a scary reminder that you never truly know someone, no matter how well you think you do. I never heard from David again, but I still shudder to think about what could have happened if I hadn't found out about his double life.